my colleagues on the other side of the aisle here reinforce this ridiculous narrative. One even suggesting that almost 10% of our uniformed military was extremists, 200,000 members. Ridiculous, by the way, from this committee on the other side of the aisle. Mr. Hegseth, unlike Undersecretary Call, you have a lot of experience with our military. Do you believe the military is a systemically racist organization? And if confirmed, will you commit to defend, not denigrate our troops?
Senator, I was also offended by those comments because anyone who's been on active duty in the National Guard, man, woman, in units, understand that is fundamentally false.
By the way, there's 3 studies, to his credit, Secretary Austin put out one of them, that said exactly what you just said. Fundamentally false.
Senator, they knew it. Anyone who'd been in a unit knew it. One could argue that if not the least, one of the least racist institutions in our country is the United States military.
That's
Being
right.
a racist in our military has not been tolerated for a very long time.
One of the
Never in my
greatest civil
formations,
rights
never in other
organizations in
formations.
America. Would you agree the U.S. military is one of the most forward-leaning, probably one of the greatest civil rights organizations in American history?
No doubt. No
Let me
doubt,
turn
Senator.
to another one. Last year at a hearing before this committee, I called on the Biden Secretary of the Navy to resign because he's failing in his ability to build ships. We are being completely outbuilt in terms of ships by the Chinese, and yet this Secretary of the Navy has been focused on climate change, not building ships in lethality. Mr. Hegseth, if your Secretary of the Navy ends up focusing on climate change more than shipbuilding and lethality, will you commit to me to fire him?
My Secretary of the Navy, should I be confirmed, sir, will not be focused on climate change in the Navy. Just like the Secretary of the Air Force won't be focused on LG-powered fighter jets, or the Secretary of the Army will not be focused on electric-powered tanks.
Let me ask,
We're going to be focused on lethality
1 minute
and
left.
defeating our enemy.
And I appreciate that. The other thing President Biden did, his first executive order as president, was to focus on transgender surgeries for active duty troops. This is all I'm describing the woke military here under Biden over the last 4 years. If confirmed and you issue an order saying we are going to rip the Biden woke yoke off the neck of our military and focus on lethality and warfighting, how do you think the troops will react?
Senator, I know the troops will rejoice.
They will love it.
They will love it. And we've already seen it in recruiting numbers. There's already been a surge since President Trump won the election of recruiting. The Army says
And do you
it's
think
now
our military
will surpass its
and our
recruiting
military
goals.
will follow that order?
Our military will follow that order, Senator.
Gladly.
Gladly, because they want to focus on lethality and warfighting and get all the woke, political prerogative, politically correct, social justice, political stuff out of the military.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Kane.
Oh, you
Thank you, Mr.
confident
Hegseth.
now.
I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk. I want to return to the incident that you referenced a minute ago that occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
How
And
did
you had
all
just
know?
fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged,
What?
fully
Answer
investigated
questions like
and
you just
completely
answered
cleared.
my guy question.
So you think you are completely cleared because you committed no crime. That's your
Exactly.
definition of cleared. You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared? How is
Senator-
that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she
I'm
was,
glad
and
she's here.
you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
It
no,
was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am
You-
so
you've ad-
grateful
you've
for the marriage
admitted-
I have to this
No,
amazing woman behind me.
you've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything
You've admitted that it was consensual and you were still married and you just had a child by another woman.
Again,
How do you explain your
completely
judgment?
false charges against me,
You no,
fully
wait.
investigated, and I was
You-
completely clear.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So
Just
you
talking
can't,
about a hypothetical.
so you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge
And it
you
was
cheat, but
fully
you acknowledge
investigated.
that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, not a perfect person, not claiming to
But
be.
no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a
Okay.
disqualifying offense,
Answer
would you
the
not?
question.
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
Answer the question.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment.
Mhm.
The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
Your attorney
those
used
false
the phrase,
claims, I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
but you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint.
Mhm.
You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't
Exactly.
reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the
Exactly.
commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated
He wouldn't have
every
been
part of the
nominated.
process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us. And I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because
Exactly.
you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States.
Exactly.
Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you an open book, as everyone who's
You're
watched this
not.
process.
Not,
With multiple non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us. Much has been made of your workplace behavior as a leader of nonprofit veterans organizations and as a Fox News contributor. Were you fired from either of the leadership positions with the nonprofits?
I was the leader. I was the CEO of Concerned
I know
Veterans
which
for
ones,
America
but
and the
those
executive
two,
director
were
of
you
Vets for
fired?
Freedom.
Were you fired from either
And I
of
was
them?
never fired from a
Do you have
veterans
do you
organization.
have non-disclosure agreements with either of those organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Many of your work colleagues have said that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality.
They're not
of
they're not
the
anonymous.
letters
We've
on the
seen-
record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record. people
We've
who've
seen
worked me
records with
at
names
Vets for
attached to
Freedom, Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News
One of
attributing
your
to me
one of your
being
colleagues
working
said,
hard every day
one
on
one-
behalf of
one of
my
your
mission.
colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took coworkers to a strip club. You were drunk. You tried to dance with strippers. You had to be held off the stage. And one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as a result of it. Now, I know you denied these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator,
Answer.
anonymous false charges.
They're not anonymous.
They're not
And I'll
anonymous.
just conclude and say this to the chairman. You claim that this was all anonymous. We have seen records with
Exactly.
names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother.
Ooh,
So don't make this into some anonymous press thing. We have seen multiple names of colleagues consistently throughout your career that have
exactly.
talked about your abusive actions,
Chairman, I think
attitudes,
he's
words,
over
and
his time.
statements.
He's way
Women.
over his time.
I now yield.
And thank you very much. I now ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a family court order concerning the appointment of parenting time between Mr. Hexeth and Mrs. Samantha Hexeth. It states that there were no claims of domestic abuse or probable evidence of abuse in the relationship. Without objection, that will be added to the record. And we now move to Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Hegseth, for your service, for your willingness to endure this. And I'm sorry for what has been happening to you, particularly the very idea that you should have to sit there and answer hypothetical potential in somebody's imagination crimes that may take place at some point. And wouldn't that disqualify you if you were a murderer or if you were a rapist? Unfair. And I'm embarrassed.